How the hell did Trump get elected, and why does he still have any supporters? A lot of good answers here, but I want to add something I haven't seen posted yet. Trump's biggest and most difficult accomplishment was winning the primary, the intra-party election for the Republican and Democrat candidate for the president. These are basically full-blown presidential elections in and of themselves, with huge media attention and coverage. Since America is a two-party state, others exist, but they're basically a joke. Once you lock down the nomination from one of the two major parties, you're basically a coin toss to win the presidency. The way Trump won the primary was by throwing the playbook out the window and going on the offensive. The rest of the field of the Republican primary was a bunch of slimy career politicians you wouldn't trust to hold a pack of gum for you. But they were all part of the same club and sort of had an unspoken agreement that they wouldn't attack each other too much. But Trump didn't care about that and went after every single other person in that race relentlessly, every chance he got. This confused the other candidates and they didn't fire back until it was too late. Both because they weren't used to dealing with this kind of strategy and because they didn't really take Trump seriously as a threat until he was basically so far ahead it was already over. In the early stages of the primary, Jeb Bush, George W.'s brother, was a massive favorite and most thought it was a foregone conclusion that he would be the nominee. Trump went after him so hard, calling him weak and low energy, constantly interrupting and mocking him. And Bush just couldn't handle it. Because he is weak, he's uncharismatic and not particularly clever, and he was completely unprepared to deal with an offensive strategy. Trump made him look so absolutely pathetic in those debates that Bush went from polling around 30 to 40% before the debates started to polling around 3% after 4 debates. He also made sure he was always the guy in the spotlight by constantly saying ridiculous and extremely controversial things to the media, while also criticizing and undermining the trustworthiness of that media to maintain plausible deniability to all the horrible things they were accurately saying about him. And it worked, because American corporate media is completely corrupt and dishonest. It is owned by the same billionaires and corporations that own all the politicians. And the voters knew that getting them to convince themselves that Trump was somehow different was easy. The 2016 Republican debates are a fascinating example of how a good offense can cover so many other flaws in politics. It would make Goebbels jealous. Trump was mired in scandals, grossly uneducated about the issues, an obvious walking disaster that poked you in the eye like a solar eclipse. But it didn't matter because all of his opponents were just as bad as he was. And he hit them sooner, harder and more often than they hit him. Something like 70 to 80% of his speaking time in the debates was just him attacking other people, and he was speaking constantly, interrupting other candidates all the time. Those primary debates are a great watch. I've probably seen them all 5 times already by now. And if you can detach yourself from the horribleness of it all, they're pretty damn funny too. Especially the parts with Jeb Bush. I would definitely recommend watching them if you really want to see for yourself just why and how Trump won the presidency. Not a Trump supporter, but I think a lot of people who aren't die-hard Trump people in 2016 probably were sick of career politicians and gave it a chance. I'm speaking mostly for those who were on the fence. Plus, Hillary is one of the worst candidates ever presented. He went around the Rust Belt saying he'll bring everybody's jobs back, that he'll reopen the factories, plants, steel mills and so on. So America's forgotten former middle class voted for him. There's a shit ton of these people. He didn't waste his time campaigning in states he knew he would lose, like California. He was great at picking up swing states. The media never talks about it, but there's a lot of places in USA that are financially wrecked from bad trade deals and globalization. My dad lost his job because of NAFTA. Our whole town did. My whole town voted Trump in 2016 as a big fuck you to the establishment who've forgotten about us. It's not that we're stupid and racist, it's just that Trump is the only human who actually acknowledged our pain. Obama never visited my town. To use an analogy, it's like when you're homeless and everyone ignores you. Then finally some skin-headed weirdo walks up and says, "Hey bud, I know you're hungry. I'm going to the ATM to take out a few hundo to help you. It doesn't matter if I like or trust the guy. He's the only human who's acknowledged me, so I quickly say, okay, you have my vote, man. I'm starving." People in pain don't think rationally. Some people in pain just want to see the whole goddamned system burn to the ground. I've always found these videos from 2016 interesting. Why Trump will win, Michael Moore explains. https://www.youtube.com/watch v=vmm5hfxnxy4. President Trump. How and why? https://www.youtube.com/watch v=glg9g7bcjks. Trump. Right. Okay. The world's gone nuts. https://www.youtube.com/watch v=w305uffn8q. Edit. And this vid from this year to https twitter.com/jimgaffigan/1309570123909476352. The real answer. Democrats promised the presidency to a woman who happened to be the most polarizing and hated political figure in American history. It all went downhill from there. Twitter. Celebrities and the news do not reflect the actual American opinion very much. If those are your only sources of information, of course it will be off. A large demographic has been told they are all inherently racist. They are also mocked for their religious beliefs and antiquated view of family and gender roles. They feel marginalized and disaffected, and Trump has played to these concerns. Sorry for the longest response of all time, but I feel like this is more complicated than just people who voted for Trump are just racist. I voted for Hillary Clinton because I thought she was the lesser of two evils. But my parents and older sister voted for Trump. I remember being so confused and dumbfounded when they told me they voted for Trump. Because I know my parents and sister are very intelligent, kind, and generous people. I thought all Trump supporters must have been all stupid, racist, God-fearing people. My family isn't religious. They believe abortion should be legal. They aren't racist, but if they voted for Trump, they had to be voting for everything he stands for. Right. Well, when I thought about it, just because I voted for Hillary, it didn't mean I agreed with everything she said or did. I just made a choice. So, I tried to stay open-minded and non-judgmental when I asked them why they voted for Trump. They told me that they agreed more with his economic policies, where they want to avoid socialism, and believed a free market, and thought capitalistic policies were an imperfect system, but overall the best system to maintain the economy of the U.S. My mom is a pharmacist at a hospital and has a lot of doctor friends that she invites over, and they discuss politics. And most of these doctors are immigrants from Czech Republic, Mexico, Venezuela. And I was also confused to find out they also voted for Trump. Why? They said it was because they worked hard to come into the country legally and didn't agree with people who came illegally, and they were worried that what they viewed as more socialist and communist policies would be passed in the U.S. and create problems that they already tried to get away from. They don't respect how Trump calls people names and acts like a child. But they think Democratic politicians are just as mean and disrespectful, but in a more passive-aggressive way. Overall, they think he is still the lesser of two evils, particularly for economic reasons. I think most people are pretty moderate, where they agree with some conservative ideals and some liberal ones. But the people that get attention from the news are either extremist Trumpers or extremist leftists. And it's made everyone in America feel like they are in a war with Nazi racists versus Nazi snowflakes, and everyone has to choose their side. Fox and CNN, and most news, is biased as hell, and contributes to these portrayals. I don't think it's as black and white as people are saying. I'm voting for Biden in November. My parents are voting for Trump. So we disagree on who would be a better representative for America. But we respect each other's right to vote for what we believe, without resorting to calling into questions each other's morality and humanity. Because at the end of the day, it's a choice between a douchebag and a turd sandwich. I can't speak for the rest of the country, but this is personally what I have seen. He was generally voted for. Answer provided to me by non-party affiliated voters, as he was a citizen running against career politicians, and most people wanted to see career politicians get absolutely upset by the wrench. You may also refer to him as the tool in the system and lose their grip on the reins. The point should have been for our best citizens to also have a chance at running, not just the same politicians that at the end of the day eat dinner together and engage in the same illegal activities like they're above us all. However, Trump was the closest, as we have yet to see decent citizens get to where he got and are still hoping. TBH, it was initially amusing seeing even Republicans not wanting Trump there and almost for once banding together completely with their Democratic counterparts to drive him out. Many people in smaller, conservative towns feel forgotten by most Americans today. If they're spoken about, it's in a derogatory manner. The only jobs they know how to do in order to support themselves are going away and actively vilified. Trump spoke to them and actually seemed to care. That's a big part of it. I wasn't old enough to vote in the last election by 1 month. After the election, I read Strangers in Their Own Land, and I highly recommend it. The premise of the book is a liberal professor going to Louisiana to understand Trump supporters, whether or not you agree with them in the end. I think it does a great job of building empathy. This is coming from someone who is probably voting for Biden this year just to get this country back to some semblance of normalcy with our international relations. But with how polarized politics are these days, at least in the US, the book a nice read to start bridging the gap. I can answer that, and you're going to get a better sense of it than you will from like-minded Redditors. How? I've heard nonstop for the last 4 years. Could the election be decided by so many racist, ignorant a-holes? Quote, but I don't think this is the right question. The numbers just don't add up, unless you literally believe that half the country is made up of racist, ignorant a-holes. And if you're on Reddit, there is a good chance you do. But set that aside for a moment, and we know from the polls that many voters considered Trump unqualified, lacking in good temperament and/or personally distasteful, and yet they still voted for him. So, what explains all this? I don't think you need to resort to racism, or sexism, or any of the other usual bugbears. I think it was simply the FU factor. Here's what I mean. In our culture, we have evolved a set of institutions that are overwhelmingly progressive or center-left in nature. The media, Hollywood, the music industry, big city government, universities, Reddit, Twitter. And here's the thing. These are all institutions with extraordinary visibility and influence. There are institutions that are more conservative in nature, the police and the military come to mind, but those institutions do not have the same cultural impact. Military leaders, for example, often worry about the disconnect between their services and the culture as a whole. And the military is literally forbidden from campaigning for or otherwise endorsing political causes or candidates. All this is exacerbated by an attitude which suggests that one's ideological opponents are not just wrong, or sadly misguided, but evil, ignorant and worthy of mockery. It's an attitude one can find in university courses, on respectable op-ed pages, the internet, everywhere. It surrounds Reddit like water surrounds a fish. So what we're left with is a gigantic swath of Middle America, from Idaho to Georgia, and Arizona to Pennsylvania, full of voters who for decades have turned on the television or attended college only to be told how racist, greedy and ignorant they are. Think affirmative action is wrong because the government shouldn't favor some races at the expense of others? Racists think a country should be able to control its own borders. Racist and xenophobic think abortion is wrong. You're not just sadly misguided, you're a patriarchal oppressor who wants to control women's bodies. Believe in the right to self-defense? You're a bitter clinger, person of faith, a superstitious menace. So along come Trump and Clinton. Clinton, whatever her virtues and faults, is entirely a creature of this center-left progressive establishment. The vote for her is a vote for more of the same. But Trump is an outsider. Under Trump, you might believe there's at least the possibility that some things might change. You have a candidate who at least says he respects you and your views. And most of all, voting for him would be a giant FU to an establishment that hates him and has made its scorn for you and your values crystal clear for decades. Personally, I despise Trump and everything he stands for. I hope I don't need to belabor this point. I didn't vote for the guy. And if we impeached him tomorrow, great. But the people who held their noses and voted for him despite not because of the things he's said and done, I don't have to agree with it to understand it. Hillary Clinton was a terrible candidate and Democratic-leaning voters were disinclined to vote. The same thing that happened in 2016 appears a possibility in 2020. Again, because Biden is, alas, another terrible candidate. Woman shrugging light skin tone. I know my family fell behind him simply because he's a Republican who's able to seriously piss off Democrats, and they hate anything that falls left of center. Now they follow them like the proverbial golden calf. U.S. is a two-party system, entrenched and divided ever since independence. In a lot of ways, it's about the ideas and policies of the one that the other does not like. So, in the absence of any real alternative, aligning with one side is an evil less than going against it. People voted for Trump because they don't like policies of Democratic Party and that's it. Trump can be whatever as long as policies that Dems are pushing for are prevented. So, even if you don't like Trump personally, seeing what's going on with protests and riots, it's not even a question. Being in Europe, I think you lack daily exposure to what's going on and only see tip of the iceberg. You'd be shocked if I tell you that Biden is not guaranteed election. Not even close. I DK anything about politics, but what I heard was that people wanted not Hillary Clinton and he was the only other choice. Again, I DK anything about politics, lol. BCUZ Hillary was a terrible candidate, and Trump was able to hit her as he was the outsider. Low voter turnout helped as well. Hillary. People voted for him for whatever reason that they have. Their opinions. Whatever. Everyone is allowed to have one. Since then, people have turned on each other and it's caused everyone on both sides to dig their heels in more. At this point, it's impossible to change the minds of anyone on either side. I just wish everyone would stop being so terrible to each other. A lot of conservative people I have talked to voted third party in 2016. They knew Trump was a bad idea, but couldn't stand the thought of Hillary either. As someone who definitely does not support Trump, He is extremely demonized by the media in my opinion. The man has enough to make him look bad, but they just exaggerate it even more and find new reasons to hate him all the time. He's made fun of constantly, and anything he may have possibly sort of handled well is completely ignored. A lot of people want conservative politics to prevail on issues like small government, free market, Second Amendment, economic perspectives, social programs, etc. People who aren't happy with either candidate, and a lot of people weren't in 2016, will gladly vote for Trump over someone who's counter to their values in these departments, regardless of his idiotic persona and offensive public image.
If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. TooAfraidToAsk is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.